Hello everybody, it's vanburman here. Welcome back to another video today, as you probably guessed by the title. And if you've watched any of my recent videos, you will know that this one is on the original GTX Titan that only just about works, but it managed to work long enough for me to get these benchmarks. Been a pain, as you probably well know, has been documented on the channel, just to get this thing even functioning. But luckily we got a video out of it. It's a very cool card. It's been up on the shelf of interesting items or interesting graphics cards, and yeah, I'm glad that we finally managed to do this. The video is quite interesting that's coming up. I think it falls in really well with what I've been doing recently. So it falls in well with the laptop and the RX 480. And there is a card in the test bench. You can probably see 50 vanburman points, if you can tell me what it is. You won't be able to guess. I shouldn't have thought. But without further ado, let's get in, see what this bad boy can do. So I realise I'm gilding the lily here, but I'm sure we are all aware of the GTX Titan. We'll carry this out in its normal format. In terms of the overclock, it was a very minor one. Basically just increased the power limit and the temperature limit as well. I never actually managed to fix the whole PCIe slot business, so it remained running at ×8 or x8 rather than x16 or ×16. But it seemed to run pretty well and actually sort of in line with what I would expect. It is worth noting that, you know, in the following graphs, the GTX 1063GB edition is overclocked substantially more than the other two, but it does have substantially less VRAM, so perhaps they all sort of fit together. But no, it's no question that it's a very iconic card, if nothing else. By today's standards, you know, it probably is low to mid-range, I imagine. Not that I've seen, but I imagine that the 1660 or 1650 will almost certainly outperform this. But let's get into it. So we're going to kick things off with a Shogun 2. Now I managed to get into some battles here, or a battle, and it was quite enjoyable actually. Fine, ran perfectly well. The first benchmark though is Left 4 Dead, and as we can see, the RX 480 takes the lead on this particular one. They're all sort of really high anyway, so I wouldn't say that we're, you know, too bothered about it, but, you know, Titan does pretty well here as well, and if it's, you know, the sort of difference between the 1% low and the average that you're after, it'll give you that. Moving on now to Rocket League. They're all very, very similar, almost into the point of margin of error. So, you know, not too much between them. They all ran perfectly well and fine. You know, me being you know, quite a favourite with Rocket League, found it all perfectly fine. Yeah, I would notice if there was any major drops in 1% low or anything like that. So, yeah, perfectly fine for that sort of game. Shogun 2 is the one that gave us the biggest win for the 1060 so far, and in fairness, you know, there's very little difference between them in reality. As soon as you get out of the benchmark into the actual game, you know, I played a 20 versus 20 here, and this is on the on the Titan, and it's running over 60 FPS pretty much all the time, and even when it drops down, it's fine. So yeah, you know, very similar across the board there. And now moving to the medium benchmarks. Now, if I'm being totally honest, I expected Doom to do a lot better. The Vulcan scores were obviously worse, or maybe not obviously, but they were worse. And yeah, I assumed that the Titan would do a lot better in this one. I don't know why it's more heavily favoured towards a 1060. Don't know if it's an architecture thing, you know, a DirectX API thing. Potentially, but yeah, I'm not sure. Titan lost a lot of points in this particular benchmark, as you probably imagine. Moving on to GTA 5. You know, all the scores are pretty high here. Titan was once again below the other two, and I've been quite surprised. And on the flip side, actually really impressed with the GTX 1063GB version in the laptop. So I think it's roughly the same score as a desktop one, but yeah, just to give you that kind of score is really impressive. I don't want to overlook the RX 480, but yeah, that's the big comparison for me. And we move on to Shadow of War benchmarks. Basically, pretty much the same picture, but they're a bit tighter here. And actually, because you've got the disparity between the 0.1% low and the average for the 1060, it actually scores a lot less points here, or scores a lot more points even, than the Titan. And the Titan it ran it fairly well, fair play to it. It's got enough VRAM. I think that's probably the factor here for the 1060 is that the 3 gig version is probably a bit too low to run that very high. So as we move on to the hard benchmarks, everything was pretty much, very close, almost neck and neck at this point when we get to these scores. Now Metro 2033, the benchmark is really tough for my particular metrics in terms of, judging the graphics cards against each other. But the Titan holds its own okay here, although it does lose a good amount of points, mainly because the average is a bit lower than perhaps it should be compared to the other ones. But it is worth remembering, of course, that the Titan is the oldest one here, and Metro is still more than playable. Obviously, benchmarks can sometimes not be indicative of the actual gameplay. As you can see, Final Fantasy was pretty similar, although the Titan does really well here, and as you can see from the FPS on the video behind you, it was in the mid to high 40s the whole time, and running really well actually, considering that this is, I believe, the newest title on the whole of this list. It's held its own really well. So we did go into The Witcher with the score between the Titan and the RX 480 extremely close, and as you can probably tell by the charts, it just missed out. And we'll go into it when we get to that slide, but these scores for The Witcher are really impressive. I know that there's no hairworks, that's obviously the big thing, but it is on Ultra, and the game was, totally playable on all three of these cards. And I think that's actually, a testament to how well, especially this sort of, obviously the Titan being high range, but the mid to high range has held up. So I look at the 3D Mark scores, and I actually expected the Titans to do a lot better here. It came second overall in the DirectX 9 comparison, and it came third in Firestrike and third in Time Spy. Time Spy was where I expected it to get a bit of a lead over the 1060 because of its extra VRAM. Once again, I'm certain there must be an API limitation here because of how old the card is. So the user benchmark scores for gaming, obviously very tight. The Titan got 57, and that was with an overclock applied, which I then didn't get to use for all the games. And it, like I say, it wasn't an overclock really worth writing home about. In the end, it was just the power and temperature increase. And finally, the point I've been waiting to look at, because I invented it, is the overall points. And we got the Titan in green, we got the 1060 in blue, and the RX 480 in red. Now, lower is better. So as you can see, the Titan falls right in the middle of the stack, pretty much, of those two. And these three cards are actually a really good sample to look at, because they all seem to perform, overall quite similarly. And as you can see, the Titan's lost it on the medium benchmarks. It lost a good few points in, well, all of them, in compared to the other scores. Even though it got the highest, easy score, the lowest easy score and the lowest high score. There's just one or two benchmarks there in the medium category, especially Doom, that really lay it down compared to the other two. And it does still perform, and it still will do you a job for the money, or for how much they're going for, how much all graphics cards are going for at the minute, but even if you compare it to that, the Titan is not worth the money. It's nice as a, you know, sentimental, you know, bit of graphics card history, which is what I appreciate it for. You know, the reason I bought it, the reason it's up on the shelf. And yeah, I've enjoyed having a mess around with it. It's been, you know, good from many aspects. You know, I've been able to look at it from a troubleshooting point of view. I've been able to, you know, actually use a Titan for the first time. I did have a GTX 780 Ti back in the day, and that one was roughly similar performance. Maybe at some point we'll do a comparison. But yeah, I'll leave it there. Let me know what you thought down in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed the video. And as always, I'll see you next time for another really old graphics card review.